In the next section, we're going to look at the culture and the counterculture. The main idea is that the counterculture that emerged in the 1960s and in the 1970s left a lasting impact on American life. Our learning objectives is to analyze the counterculture movement's rise, fall, and lasting legacy. The counterculture of the 1960s was a rebellion of teens and young adults against mainstream American society. Young Americans believed that society's values were hollow and its priorities were misplaced. They called the mainstream the establishment, and they wanted to create an alternative culture based on peace and love. So where did the counterculture come from? Well, the number of teens and young adults in the United States rose dramatically in the 1960s. Of course, this is because they were members of the baby boom generation, this large generation born after the end of World War II. These young people were living in turbulent times. They had to deal with the threat of nuclear war, racial discrimination and segregation, the Vietnam War, and environmental pollution. Rebellion against the dominant culture was not new. The Beat generation of the 1950s questioned traditional values, challenged authority, and experimented with nonconformist lifestyles. We also saw rising student activism. Students on college campuses began rebelling against school policies that they considered restrictive, unjust, or just not relevant. At the University of California at Berkeley, students protested when school officials banned speech-making and political organizing at the entrances to campus. The events at Berkeley marked the beginning of the free speech movement, which swept campuses across the nation. The students used the tactics of civil disobedience to protest injustices. Mainstream Americans were shocked as they expected young people not to question authority. Thousands of teens and young adults left school, jobs, and traditional home life as a part of the counterculture. They rejected materialism and the work ethic of the older generation. And the Haight-Ashbury district, which is a neighborhood in San Francisco located at the intersections of Haight and Ashbury streets, becomes the center of the counterculture movement. Looking at hippie culture, they sought new experiences. Eastern religions, astrology, the occult, and illegal drugs were all associated with it. Typically they wore very casual and colorful clothing. Men began wearing longer hair, beards, and afros. And commonly, many of them were referred to as flower children. And of course, that's largely because many of them were known to wear flowers in their hair. Their decline came really kind of after the summer of 1967, which really was the height of the hippie movement. And that was known as the Summer of Love. Freedoms that they took oftentimes led to problems with addiction. Also, many in the counterculture found themselves with no way really to support themselves, and a lack of rules led to conflicts. As far as spirituality, as the counterculture members rejected materialism, many embraced spirituality, including a broad range of beliefs that included astrology, magic, Eastern religions, and new forms of Christianity. Two new religious groups of this time were the Unification Church and the Hare Krishna movement. Now we look at mainstream reactions to the counterculture. Some observers of the counterculture were put off by the unkempt appearance of hippies. On a deeper level, many mainstream Americans objected to the unconventional values of the counterculture. They saw hippies as disrespectful, uncivilized, and threatening. To many in the establishment, it appeared that society was unraveling. The television show All in the Family highlighted the older generation's distrust of the counterculture and the younger generation's desire to change society, and particularly illustrated in two of the characters. Carol O'Connor played Archie Bunker, the main character in All in the Family, and Archie is extremely conservative and very narrow-minded and very hostile, particularly towards his son-in-law, Mike, who he refers to as Meathead. And Mike and and Archie's daughter Gloria, they're part of more the counterculture movement, embracing these challenges to society. And so, a lot of the show's humor plays off of the conflict between these differing values. The counterculture really declined in part due to illicit drug use. Some became addicted to drugs, and others died from drug overdoses. Some hippie communities became involved with criminal activities, the most notorious of which was Charlie Manson and his followers, who were responsible for the Tate LaBianca murders. Now we look at the legacy of the counterculture. Americans became more casual in the way that they dressed, more open-minded about lifestyles and social behavior, and attitudes about sexual behavior loosened. People explored topics that were once taboo. As far as art and film, a new style emerged called pop art. It aimed to appeal to popular taste. Andy Warhol led the movement. Film broadened its subject matter as censorship rules relaxed, and the film industry adopted a rating system that we're now very familiar with. Early on, it was G, which was for general audiences, PG, which was for parental guidance, and R, which was restricted. And then also they had X or XXX films, which were for adults. But we've since seen additional ratings added, particularly the PG-13. And then also there was a period of time where we saw movies that were rated NC-17, which was kind of worse than R. So, but the whole rating system initially, the G, PG, and R, really came into effect during this time frame. As far as music, the Beatles brought new techniques and ideas to rock and roll. Bob Dylan wrote political songs and became the spokesman for his generation. And Woodstock was a music and arts fair that was a celebration of an era. And this was held in 1969, so slightly past the peak of the counterculture movement, but nonetheless a huge musical celebration.